Whenever whites and American Indians entered into treaties, they are going to be very, very difficult to enforce. The people that were granted the power or the authority to enforce the treaties were the United States Army, and the United States Army, which was largely the police force for the frontier. Now, if, say, for example, gold was discovered on an Indian reservation, people would pour into the reservation. And the United States Army had some sympathy or empathy for the people that were pouring into the region. And many of these soldiers had a lot of hostility directed towards the Indians. And so the United States Army will largely just look the other way as whites poured into these regions where gold had been discovered. Case in point would be the Black Hills of South Dakota in 1868. The Black Hills is the home of the Sioux Indian Reservation. In 1874, George Armstrong Custer was sent into South Dakota, and he reported back that there was gold in the streams, in the waterbed, and gold prospectors poured into the region. And it's Custer's reports that really ushered in something of a new gold rush, as people just poured in an attempt to strike it rich, like many uh, of their predecessors had done when the California gold strike started in 1849. So many people were hoping to make it rich. Custer Custer's a pretty interesting character. He's quite arrogant. He's quite flamboyant. Made a name or a reputation for himself during the American Civil War, winning a few cavalry exchanges, being promoted time and time again. But after the war's over, he falls back to his traditional ranks, spends a lot of time on the frontier. It's a very, very boring life. And he favored a no compromise policy towards the American Indian. I mean, he would have been more in the camp of a William Tecumseh Sherman or a Philip Sheridan when it came to the American Indian. Custer's nemesis will be one Sitting Bull of the Sioux, and Sitting Bull had a vision. He had a friend who cut 100 slices of skin from his skin using a very, very sharp knife. And then Sitting Bull danced while staring into the sun. This was known as the sun dance. And in the process, Sitting Bull had a revelation. And in his dream, or in the revelation, what he saw American soldiers falling inside his camp upside down, and he interpreted that to mean that the Sioux were going to win a great battle. As I said in the introduction, during part one of this lecture, the Indians on the plains were not able to work together. They were in a state of conflict most of the time, but it's going to be here in 1876 with whites pouring into the Sioux lands where the Indians of the Great Plains will in fact be able to work together. They will cast aside their animosities or hostilities and join together to confront Colonel Custer. Custer underestimated the size of the enemy. And I mean, it was an educated assumption. I mean, most of the time when the American forces encountered the Indians would be very small in number. But on this occasion, that won't be the case. Custer will encounter Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and uh, thousands of Sioux at a place called the Little Bighorn. And it will be here that the very proud, the very arrogant, very flamboyant uh, Colonel Custer, who strutted like a peacock, will have his feathers plucked. Some years after the event, there was a sociologist who went out and conducted oral histories, trying to record uh, past events among the Indians, and he found a couple uh, in the 1930s that were alive at the time of Custer's last stand at the Little Bighorn, and the Indian who was interviewed gave this statement in a book that's entitled Black Elk Speaks. Most of the work focuses on Black Elk himself, but there are other Indians that do give or provide some sort of testimony. Um, this Indian put it this way. He said, "I met a soldier on horseback, and I let him have it. The arrow went through from side to side under his ribs and stuck out on both sides. He screamed and took hold of his saddle horn and hung on, wobbling with his head hanging down. I kept alongside him. I took my heavy bow and I struck him across the back of the neck. He fell from his saddle, and I got off and beat him to death with my bow." Black Elk himself provided his take on the events of that day as well. And he witnessed the carnage, he witnessed the death that occurred all around him. And in one incident, he discusses that he and one of his friends, and at the time Black Elk was just a little kid, he's 12 or 13 years old, and one incident that he tells about is that he and one of his friends ran out and scalped a soldier, and they took the scalp and ran up to the hillside. Now the fighting is occurring, but up on the hillside you have the older men and the women who are watching, and so the little kids, they scalp a soldier, and they run up to Mama and say, "Mama, Mama, look what we did." And Mama says, "That's good, son." But Black Elk describes the killing and carnage this way. He said, "After a while, I got tired of looking around. I could smell nothing but blood, and I got sick of it. So I went back home with some others. I was not sorry at all. I was a happy boy. These Wasichus, whites, had come to kill our mothers and fathers and us, and it was our country." And so Black Elk was defending his country and his way of life, his very culture. Now, when news of this event, news of Custer's last stand and the 7th Cavalry being completely wiped out, arrived in the city, back in the East, America was shocked. It was 1876, and we were preparing for our centennial celebration, and news that the 7th Cavalry had been completely whacked by an American Indian conglomerate, if you will, was shocking to the sensibilities, and it was just very difficult for people to even understand. But this is really the last stand for the victors as well, because they had come together and they had resisted Custer and they had defeated Custer and the 7th Cavalry, but they had to disperse to prepare for the winter, and so the tribes will break up and will prepare. They had hunting to do. They had to get ready for the onset of the winter. And you see, the Indians would not fight during the wintertime. And what will then happen is the United States Army will continue to fight, and they will fight through the winter at a time when they'll be able to catch the Indians completely off guard. In the same book, Black Elk Speaks, um, one of these incidents, one of these examples of fighting during the wintertime was described this way. Dull Knife was camping with his band of Chelas on Willow Creek at the edge of the Bighorn Mountain. And one morning, very early, near the end of the moon of falling leaves, the soldiers came there to kill them. The people were all sleeping. The snow was deep and it was very cold. When the soldiers began shooting into the teepees, the people ran out into the snow, and most of them were naked from their sleeping robes. Men fought in the snow and cold with nothing on them but their cartridge belts. It was a hard fight because the warriors thought of the women and the children freezing. They could not whip the soldiers, but those who were not killed and did not die from the cold got away and came to our camp on the tongue. I can remember when Dull Knife came with what was left of his starving and freezing people. They had almost nothing, and some of them had died on the way. Many little babies died. Now, the American Indians will never be able to mount a will never be able to mount an offensive like they did against Custer ever again. And although there will be scattered conflicts that will occur, Chief Joseph is probably emblematic of that. Chief Joseph was the chief for the Nez Perce Indians, and the Nez Perce Indians had a pretty good relations with the whites for years. They had befriended Lewis and Clark in 1804 and 1805, and it had attempted to help them. But Joseph had a problem. He attempted to maintain or preserve the peace between whites and his own tribe, but he had pressure imposed from inside the tribe. The younger men wanted to go to war, and the older men did not. The older men were already warriors. The younger men were not. And one of the ways in which the younger man would become a warrior is by fighting. And so pressure will come from the younger guys to engage. Ultimately, the Nez Perces will go to war, and Chief Joseph will lead his tribe. He ultimately knows or sees that they are losing and they don't have a chance. And so he leads his tribe on about a 1,500-mile jaunt headed towards Canada. And there's this intriguing moment when the Nez Perce are being led by Chief Joseph, and they're moving through what has just become Yellowstone National Park. And the United States Army is in hot pursuit as they're moving through Yellowstone National Park, and they encounter the first wave of tourists. A rather interesting encounter, I might add. Joseph ultimately leads his people. They don't quite make it to Canada. They are captured and turned back and moved to the reservation. And Joseph makes a very famous speech in which he says the following. My people ask me for food, and I have none to give. It is cold, and we have no blankets, no wood. My people are starving to death. Where is my little daughter? I do not know. Perhaps even now she is freezing to death. Hear me, my chiefs. I have fought. But from where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever. Joseph and the Nez Perce is really emblematic of a number of Indian tribes who will engage in scattered or small skirmishes against the whites, including Geronimo and his Apache in 1886. He will attempt to resist and to fight, but Geronimo will ultimately be dissuaded from these actions. Um, in 1888 and 1890, there is a movement that begins among the Paiute and Sioux, whereby if Indians will wear a ghost shirt, and they will engage in what's known as the ghost dance. It's something of a cult movement. It was initiated by a prophet known as Wovokia. And it's a very, very sad, slow dance. And I'm actually demonstrating right now, but you can't see that. But if it, according to Wovokia, if you would perform the ghost dance, you would become immune from the bullets of the white man. And once the Indian and the whites are engaged in battle, the whites would just simply disappear because the Indian would be immune from the bullets, but the white man would not be immune from the bullets from the American Indian. And the order went out to make sure that the Indians did not dance. And so the United States Army is going to be responsible for enforcing this. And at Wounded Knee, South Dakota, a number of soldiers got a little bit nervous when the Indians started to dance. It will be at Wounded Knee when soldiers fire into the camp, and they'll kill about 200 people, including men, women, children, and at least one blind American Indian. And this is going to be this atrocity is the site of, it's very hallowed ground for the Sioux. And in the 1960s and 70s, it will become the center of a protest movement staged by the American Indian as well, Sioux Indian, I should say. Now, the American government did not see the reservations as being a permanent solution in regard to Indian policy. They believed that it was simply just going to be a temporary measure. There was a movement afoot, and there was a law passed known as the Dawes Severalty Act of 1887. And the attempt was to break up the tribal bonds or tribal connections and take Indians who were living on the reservations and give them individual plots of land within the boundaries of the reservation, but give them individual plots of land and turn them into small-scale farmers. And so I'll take an Indian, and if he's willing to farm the land, I'll give him the land. I'll give him 160 acres, and he can farm that land. That land is his. It's not the tribe's. It's his. And it teaches him to be self-sufficient. It teaches him to provide for his family. And at the same time, it's turning him into an American. That's the notion. You turn him in, you're mainstreaming him. You're integrating him into the American agrarian economy. And at the same time, the hope is that you're breaking up these tribal bonds as well, and eliminating the need for this reservation. The problem is going to be that most of the Indians were not farmers, and once they're given these lands, speculators will come in and purchase the lands from the Indians. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture, and I look forward to seeing you. Enjoy life. Good day.